And good afternoon, and welcome back to Beyond the Devastation. This is episode 6. Today we have a special guest because she's married to my best friend. But not only that, but she has a story of her own. And this is today, our guest is going to be, as I've advertised, uh, Dr. Mary Kaye Holmes. She's the number one international bestseller. She's an author, UN ambassador, motivational speaker, empowerment specialist, mentor, coach, you name it, she's done it. But today she's going to talk about her story of the devastation. And we've got her for 2 episodes. So I got her for episode 6 and I got her for episode 7. But I want you to listen intensely today. We were talking in the green room how one person has been through so much, but yet been able to survive. She's gone through more than most people have gone through before the age of 20, let alone the age of 30. Or I'm not even going to tell you your age. That's not my job. But we want you to listen intently, understand what she's been through, and then we're going to bring her back for 7 so she can tell you how she got out and how she continues to help other people through her story. And this is what we've asked her to do today. Tell her story. So let's give her certainly a warm welcome today as she's on Beyond the Devastation, episode 6. This is Dr. Mary Kaye Holmes, who I had the privilege of actually performing her wedding. And when she got married to her husband, Terry Holmes, and it's certainly great. Mary, thank you for your time. I know you're busy. And today I really kind of wanted to just you to tell your story. I've done the intro. I've read your bio, but I don't think it does it justice. I think you can tell the devastating part better than I can. So welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Look, this is an honor because I always say it's always such an honor for me to share my story because I want to bring hope and healing to as many people as I can because I truly believe that God doesn't waste moments. He doesn't waste any of our moments, any of our traumas that we go through, any of our situations that we face that seem so devastating in life. But yet later on, you can look back and you can see how now you can utilize that to help others. And so because life happens to everybody and some of us go through some unimaginable pain in life. And I've certainly had my share, as you mentioned, for one person to go through as much as I've gone through. And I'm not afraid to share my age. I just turned the big 40. So I just turned 40. But one of the interesting things about my story is that although I met my trafficker, I was human trafficked, but although I met my human trafficker at the age of 15, I didn't know what it was until I was 38 years old. So just 2 years ago, the light bulb went off and I realized that that's what it was that I went through. But it didn't just start there. It didn't just start with me meeting this man who decided to traffic me and exploit me and use me and manipulate and control and on and on and on. It started early on because people who seek out young girls or young boys or anybody for that matter, because adults can be trafficked as well, they usually can spot out those that are vulnerable, those who have different life issues that they've had to face over time that has kind of broken them down. And so their self-esteem is shot. They're going through a lot of issues of insecurity and lacking confidence, and they're prime for people to prey upon them, to prey upon these quote unquote weaknesses. So for me, I was certainly kind of beat up by life by the time I was 15 years old and met him. And I'll go back and start where it all really began, which was at the age of 4 years old. At 4 years old, I was molested by an older male relative. And unfortunately, it continued throughout my early childhood. So it continued for a few years. And I thought it was normal. At that time, I knew it was wrong, but I thought it happened to everybody because it was something that was unfortunately very prevalent in my family. So as I got older, I didn't tell anybody and I kept it to myself. And as a matter of fact, I stayed private about it probably up until I wrote my first book, which was back in, I think, 2017. And so all of those years from the age of 4, holding on to this secret, holding on to this pain and dealing with it on my own, I kept myself bottled up. And I had a lot of built up, self-esteem issues, a lot of anger. I was acting out as a young teen, so much so that by the time I was 14 years old, I was pregnant for the first time. And at the age of 15, as I mentioned, I met the first man who would human traffic me. And as I just said, it's crazy to even say that I was trafficked twice, but by two different men, but most people who are trafficked, unfortunately, are re-victimized, and that is what happened to me.
And Dr. Mary, can you say, I mean, we might have somebody that doesn't even know what that means. What does it mean to be trafficked?
Well, has several definitions. So there's different ways that people can be trafficked. And a lot of times people think about young kids being snatched into white vans. That's like that first image that comes to their mind. Young kids being snatched off the street from their parents. But it doesn't always look like that. Human trafficking can literally look like a married couple a woman who's married to her husband, but her husband exploits her for money, for have her serving in a way that is inhumane, like an involuntary servitude kind of thing. It can look like a young girl who is in a relationship with an older person or even someone her age. I could have been human trafficked by another teenager if I was being exploited. A prime example of that is like what happened to me, being forced to transport drugs, being a drug mule. And it doesn't just mean transporting drugs across borders, like from Mexico into the United States. It can literally just mean being forced to do something illegal or any illicit activity when you're too young or you're not educated enough to make a rational decision on your own, but you're being forced or manipulated or coerced into it. Human trafficking can also look like the sex trafficking that many people are familiar with, where you are causing someone else to exploit themselves or to sell their body for money, and you're profiting off of that, off of them being at risk or in the streets and all of that. And this is some unfamiliar ways that human trafficking exists. I'll just put this out there because I think that it's very important for us to always, just take the opportunity to spread some awareness in ways that many people don't really see often. One of the ways that people can be human trafficked is young boys being put on street corners by older men. And this is something that we see often in the inner city, and we see it portrayed in movies. We hear it in the music, and a lot of people don't question it because these are usually young minority boys who are 12, 10, sometimes even 6, 7 years old. And of course, we've seen it with teenagers and even older than that, where they're given drugs to sell. They're in a poverty, and they're in a position of poverty. They're desperate and they're exploited. And a lot of times these young boys that we see selling drugs that have gotten charged, who have been locked up, gone to juvenile justice systems, they have been exploited by older people who are preying on the fact that they want to just help their moms get out of poverty or whatever the case might be. But they're young kids. They don't know what they're
young,
doing.
yeah, they're young and they're vulnerable, and
They're
and
vulnerable.
poverty, and you're marginalized, and you're black and brown, and you're a target, and
Exactly.
that's all of that wrapped up into one certainly leads to a life that certainly you didn't want for yourself. But similar to you had a life. You again, I think what you said in the beginning, when you were being molested at 4, it was a norm, and then you didn't really, the lights doesn't go off until later, but all that trauma, right? And then you didn't even have a chance to even come up for air, so to speak, right? You went from that, and then you were vulnerable, and then you found somebody who trafficked you, and then you became slave to that.
Right. For 7 years.
It's still an imprisonment. I mean, it might not be behind bars, but it's a life of servitude, right? You're chained to that person.
Right.
So you've gone through all that. You're not even 16 yet.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where were you mentally and emotionally through all this time? I mean, did you have a friend? Did you have anybody that how did you even cry for help to break free of some of this stuff?
Yeah, well, interesting enough, there was a young lady I was friends with when I met him, when I met the man who trafficked me. Her name was Danielle. And she and I would go to the mall together, going shopping. And when we would take the city bus to go to the mall, that's when I met him. And so she was there when he gave me his phone number, wrote it on a piece of a newspaper, ripped it off, gave it to me. And she saw right through him. Like, we're both young, but she was like, I don't like him, this old man trying to talk. We didn't know how old he was exactly, but she tried to talk me out of it. And a matter of fact, when I started to date him, at first, she just distanced herself a little bit more over time, because the more I got involved with him, the more the more he tried to interfere with my relationships and started to interfere with my friendships. And so he turned me against everybody who I loved, everybody that I had every support system that I had. He basically made it appear as if he was the only one who really cared about me. And that's one of those huge red flags that I just didn't know. Because if I had been educated on the signs to look out for abusive relationships, signs of human trafficking, I might have recognized these signs early on. So those relationships started to become quickly severed. And years later, as a matter of fact, probably last year, I talked about it on Facebook. I talked about what I had gone through. And she commented, my friend Danielle, she commented and she said, I remember, she said, for years, I tried to find you and would always ask about you and try to figure out where you were because I just knew something wasn't right. And I felt so bad that I didn't do more. And I said, no, you did what you could. You tried, but my mind, mentally, I was gone. Mentally, I was already taken. I might not have been physically taken, but mentally, I was already taken. And that's what happens a lot of times. We fail to see things as human trafficking or situations as human trafficking or abusive because we think, oh, the person's free to come and go as they please. They can leave whenever they want. No, if you are in prison in your mind, it is very difficult for you to break free from that person. It's almost like a constructive breaking and entering. Like, so in the law, not to get too legal on you guys, but in the law, you can physically break a window and get into someone's house or break a lock. But you can also be charged with breaking and entering if you coerce or manipulate someone to get in their house. So although they let you in, but if you use manipulation to get in, it's still a breaking and entering. And so that's what I feel like happened in my mind. There was a constructive breaking and entering for me, not to take it too deep. But in that sense, I told her, I said, I was already gone. And so when he got me by the time he got me to come to his apartment and I was forbidden to use the phone, I couldn't call out. I couldn't receive calls. I couldn't tell anybody where we were. I couldn't give out his address. I couldn't leave the apartment without his permission. I didn't have a driver's license at the time. This was before cell phones. And so I was now physically trapped. So first he got me mentally, and then he physically trapped me inside of this small 1-bedroom apartment way up, somewhere probably about an hour and some change away from my family and friends. I didn't know where I was. And at the same time, I was so scared to reach out. I wasn't allowed to leave the apartment building. And so I stayed put because I had this fear of what he would do, because he already started to show signs of being abusive. And eventually it started to become very abusive. So yeah, I mentally and emotionally, that's where I was then. I was trapped in my mind first, and then I was physically trapped.
And for everybody listening, you got please hear what she's saying. Causing mental. You were first trapped in your mind.
Mhm.
Then it was the body. So that's where it comes. So give us some signs. What should moms and dads be looking at? Or what are some things that you went through that now we're in a technology age that you didn't have?
Yeah,
I
love that
what are
question.
some things that we can tell the parents to look out for?
Yeah, great question. So one of the first things you can look out for is an abrupt change in behavior. And children act out in different ways, but that's one of the signs. But couple that with all of a sudden they're coming home with new items, brand new sneakers that they can't afford. If they're not working and all of a sudden they have new jewelry on, or all of a sudden you're catching them in lies and they're staying out, and you don't know who they're with. You don't know their friends that they say that they're hanging with. So those are some of the red flags. So what I would always tell parents is know who your children's friends are, so that when your children say, I'm with, I'm with my friend Susie, you should be able to verify, that Susie actually exists. And I'll give you this quick story to show how manipulators and abusers and traffickers can be so clever in trying to circumvent some of this. The person who did this to me, he sent a young man, a teenager, to my mom's house. He had him drive his car to my mom's house and meet my mom, so that my mom thought that every time his truck pulled up to pick me up, that it was the same young kid that she met. So she's thinking I'm dating this teenage boy. So even if the person comes and meets you every time they pull up, come outside and greet them. See who's driving off with your child, your son or your daughter. Another thing that you can look out for is, just watching for us all of a sudden, like signs of elusiveness or distance. All of a sudden, your child has become extremely distant. They don't want to open up or talk about anything. And of course, sometimes that can be normal when we got that teenage angst and all of that stuff. But when they become like that, or if your child starts to become more elusive or start to distance themselves from everybody and all of the relationships that they've, been that they've had in the past that were healthy, all of a sudden they're no longer friends with anybody. All of the relationships are gone and nothing looks the same. Have the guidance counselors at the school talk to them. Utilize all the resources that you can as far as within the school system, because sometimes they might, as a parent, we know that sometimes our children might not open up to us, but they might open up to someone else. So engage them with an aunt, a close aunt, or uncle, or someone that that they also can trust, and try to bring as many people in that can be that new support system, because that is one of the things that people like traffickers will do, is try to sever those relationships. So start to surround them with new relationships, to try to restructure that, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. So have a backup plan.
Mm-hmm.
Have other people involved in life, because it always says what it takes a community to raise a child, right? But build a community around them.
Mm-hmm.
Look for those subtle changes. We should know our children.
Mm-hmm.
If you see those nuances, look, if they walk in with a pair of Jordans that cost more than what you have in a paycheck, you know something's wrong.
Right.
And all these little things. So I think she's giving us some things. And now this is, at this time, Dr. Mary is 15, 16, like I said, 15, 16 years old, involved in this relationship that it's not a relationship. This is not, let me rephrase that. This is an incarceration, because they incarcerated her first because they wouldn't let her go. That's not a relationship. Yeah, that's far from it. But your 16th birthday, Mary, your 17th birthday, is how long did this relationship go on before you actually broke free of this human trafficker?
Yeah, so it lasted for 7 years, and it seemed like forever, because when
What's it
I
like?
tell you, it was like doing a prison bid, because I really felt like I couldn't leave. And after a while, I started to just give myself this, like, I just started to just accept things the way they were, and thought I could make the most of it and say, look, he's providing food. You can buy whatever you want, in the sense, because it wasn't like he was taking me on shopping sprees. After a while, that was just the hook. At first he was doing that, but then after a while my basic needs were being met, and then I got pregnant by him. And then I had this mentality back then, because I was young too, so I was immature, and I had my priorities were just out of whack. So in my mind, I said, I'm pregnant with this child. I don't want to have multiple children by different men. So, and I want to be with my child's father. I don't want to be a statistic. So no matter how much it hurts, I'm going to stick with this until it works. I'm going to stick around until things change. And he was also constantly feeding me with these thoughts, and feeding me with these quotes that he would say, always repeating, because he was indoctrinating me into his way of thinking, into his way of life. And so he would constantly repeat the same things over and over again, and he would constantly make them rhyme so that they would be easy to remember. So just typical, I don't even want to get into it, because
No, it's okay. It's okay.
it's almost hilarious.
Yeah, now it is. Yeah, listen, the fact that you can laugh about it now, you weren't laughing then. But
Right.
two questions I have.
Mm-hmm.
One, you were 16.
Mm-hmm.
But what about school? How did you even deal with high school? Like you said, there were counselors and teachers. Did they see a change in you? Did they ask any questions? Was that's certainly number one. But number two is, now you were pregnant at 14 and now again at 16?
Well, I got pregnant again at 16. He made me have an abortion. And because he knew that if there was evidence that we were intimate at my age, he knew he would be in trouble. Again, at the same time, I still didn't know how old he was. I was guessing, and he would make me think that he was in his 20s, but little did I know he was pushing 40. So in my mind, I'm just thinking he's just not ready for a child with me yet. He already had children. He had one. Knew he had one child. To make a long story short, he had children that were my age, but he kept that from me. he would not want me to know because that would clue me into how old he was. So
Absolutely. It was a definite tell.
right.
But what
So,
about your own schooling? I mean, how did you get your high school degree? How did you get through high school? Because you were still, I mean, 16, you were a 10th grader for the most part, you know?
so at 16, when he made me have the abortion, it was in between my 11th and my junior and senior year. And then when I got into my senior year, I was able to finish out school because, this to me, school was my escape. That was my time away from him. That was my moment to have something to myself. And so my plan was to go into the army, to go into the military. And I joined. I literally, I joined the military. I was sworn in. And
Wow.
my husband always laughs at me about this because I always say I was in the army, but I wasn't. I technically wasn't. But I was sworn in and ready to go to boot camp. I was ready to go to basic training down at Fort Jackson. And the
Fort
day of
Jackson.
my
No,
graduation,
definitely. Yes.
yeah, relaxing Jackson. I was supposed to go there. And my recruiter was at the graduation waiting to take me. And I had to tell him that I was pregnant again, that I could not go. But I, I remember feeling like, okay, all of my hopes and my dreams, because my dream was to go into the army, go to school, write for the Stars and Stripes, because I wanted to be a writer, which is the newspaper. And so I wanted to be this awesome, this amazing journalist. I had dreams. All of that came crashing down. And my recruiter, I'll never forget it. He sat down with me and he cried like a baby. He just, like, the tears would not just stop coming. He was like, "Why would you do this?" And and that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But
Correct.
I was able to, I wasn't able to go, but I was still able to redirect myself. Well, not by myself, but redirect myself with the help of my guidance counselor at school. I'll never forget her. Her name was Teresa. And Teresa helped me to get as many college applications out as possible in the short window of time that I had, because plans had drastically changed. And so that summer, we got all the applications out. I got scholarships. I got the financial aid that I needed, and I was able to enroll in a state college that same year, that fall. But I was pregnant, so I was doing everything that I can to continue with my dream. So by the time I got to the end of that fall semester, I knew that I had to take a semester off to have my baby, and then my goal was to, as soon as I could, go right back in, if possible, enroll for the summer and go back in for the fall semester full time. That was my goal, and that's actually what I wound up doing. But I did my next fall semester part time and worked part time overnight, because again, I was determined. I said, education, that belongs to me. That's
Right.
that's he control everything else.
But he
But
couldn't
in
take
my
the
mind, this was the one thing he could not take.
which is great. So your desire was still there.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
so now you're 22. You're a mom for the most. You're really a single mom for the most part. Um, you're going to school. You're working, but you're still captive.
Yeah, yeah, still, because there was so much that had been, like I said, he would put these thoughts and these ideas in my head. So I had to come out of that. Like, even after I was able to get out and finally leave him, um, and maybe that's something we can talk about in episode two,
We
or in
are.
part two.
Yeah, we definitely are. There's no doubt about it. Yes.
But just when I was able to get out, I was still so damaged that's how I was able to get re-victimized by another man. And that got me into the sex trafficking, to where I'm being pimped. And all of that was because I hadn't yet healed from the first situation that I was able to escape out of. Because I was able to physically get out of it, but mentally I was still in it.
So this is where I'm going to put a pause because I think this is where we need to kind of time out and say we're going to bring Mary back, because we're still dealing with it, but hopefully we'll get a chance to get to where she is today. Look, I've been putting up her website. I'm gonna kind of look. If you want to find out more about Mary, you can go right to her website. If you're interested in Mary being one of your speakers, or you're looking for mentoring or coaching, go to www.maryholmes.com and you can find out how you can get in contact with her and how she can help you, your organization, whether it's a Fortune 500 company or it's a nonprofit. She has the skill set to be able to help you to find that inner person in you. that can get you to where you need to go, because she was able to get it done. But next week when we come back, we're going to go to episode 7. We'll hear more of Mary's story. And but again, www.maryholmes.com. Take a screenshot, do whatever you've got to do. You'll find out more about her. You'll get the information you need. You'll find out how she can come into your organization. And this is what I do know: if she can change the life of one person, it's been worth it. And we'll find out who's the game changer for her next week when you come back. So thank you, Dr. Mary. Thank you for being a part of it. We're going to close this session out today. We're going to have you come back next week and tell more of your story. Thank you so much for joining us here today. And we're going to go out on like we normally do. So let's play our little song.